They scheduled it for 8:30 a.m., early enough to catch me off guard, late enough to say it wasn't urgent. That alone told me everything I needed to know. I showed up anyway. No point in rescheduling fate. The room was smaller than usual. Not the big executive conference space we used for board calls or quarterly reviews. This was the internal sync room. No windows. One wall screen. 4 chairs. That was the second red flag. The third was Elena Whitaker's face. She looked up from her tablet and gave me that smile I'd come to recognize over the years. Thin-lipped, symmetrical, and entirely performative. Not a wrinkle in her brow. Not a flicker of discomfort. Just the look of someone who had already made peace with the decision and was now watching to see how you'd react. Across from her sat Nina Clark, our general counsel. No coffee in her hand, which was unusual. Nina was never without caffeine before 10 a.m., unless, of course, she didn't plan to be here long. I stayed standing. "Elena," I said, nodding. "Nina." "Daniel," Elena replied, motioning to the chair across from her. "Thanks for coming in early. We'll keep this brief." I sat, slowly, deliberately. My heart was calm, my mind already ahead. "You've made it clear," Elena began, "that you don't support moving forward with the Draxon proposal." "That's correct," I said, "because it's riddled with liability exposure. Routing payments through layered holding structures in Cyprus, contracting with shell vendors without physical presence. You don't need me to explain how that lands." "We've reviewed it," Nina interjected, her voice carefully neutral. "There's some risk, yes, but it's manageable." I turned toward her. "Not if it hits a Senate Oversight Committee, or a whistleblower channel, or gets caught in an export compliance audit. This isn't just optics. It's a violation of federal procurement law and the Foreign Practices Act." Elena closed her tablet. "Daniel, the board has decided to move forward." I leaned back. "Then they can do it without me." She nodded slightly as if I'd just confirmed what she hoped I'd say. "Then we've reached an impasse." My eyes didn't leave hers. "You're really doing this?" "Effective immediately," she said, sliding a folder across the table. "Your role is terminated. We'll be processing standard severance and transition support. We appreciate your time with Kelmaris." I didn't open the folder. I didn't ask questions. I looked at her, then at Nina, then back again. "You're making a mistake," I said, not with anger, but with absolute clarity. "And not because you're firing me, but because you're aligning this company with something that can't hold." Elena didn't respond. I stood, adjusted my blazer, and paused with my hand on the chair. "People always think risk is about money," I added quietly. "But the most dangerous risks are about reputation and memory." Still no response. Just 2 pairs of eyes watching me walk out of the room as if I'd become someone else's problem. They had no idea what they'd just done. I didn't slam the door when I left. Didn't make a scene. That would have given them what they wanted. A convenient narrative to spin. Too emotional. Not a team player. Couldn't adapt to change. Let them wonder what I was thinking instead. I walked the long hallway back to my office. Or what had been my office. Nodding at people who suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. My nameplate was still on the door. Inside, the lights were off. It felt quieter than usual. Colder. I closed the door behind me. Sat for a moment. Just sat. There wasn't sadness. Not yet. Not even anger. Just this odd stillness. Like standing outside after a storm and realizing the house is still intact, but the foundation might have shifted when you weren't looking. I took a minute. Then I stood, grabbed a box from under the desk, and started packing. Not much. A framed photo of me and my daughter at the science fair. A pair of cufflinks my wife gave me for our anniversary. A notebook with years of handwritten margin notes from client meetings. And the wooden paperweight I'd carved myself during lockdown. A gift to myself the day I'd closed our biggest account in company history. I paused on that one, turned it in my hand, thought about what it represented. Integrity, real effort, long nights, work that meant something. Then I placed it gently in the box. I didn't take the plaques, the top revenue leader awards. The framed article in Tech and Ops Weekly about our division's record-setting quarter. They could keep those. Let them collect dust under whoever inherited my title. As I left the office, a few people looked up. A couple nodded awkwardly. No one said anything, except for Marcus, the IT guy I used to bring coffee for when I saw him working late. He stood near the elevators, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "They shouldn't have done that to you," he said quietly. I nodded. "Doesn't change who I am." "You'll be fine," he added. "They might not be." The elevator doors opened. I stepped in. Didn't look back. Downstairs, HR was ready. They always are. A woman I'd never met before handed me a thin folder with final paperwork and a link to an exit survey. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The kind of practiced expression you wear when you know you're part of something that's not quite right. She slid over my severance packet. Non-compete clause is standard. 1 year, no direct solicitation of current clients, no public disparagement of the firm. "I've read it before," I said flatly. "You'll be receiving COBRA information by mail," she added. "We'll also deactivate your email and internal credentials by noon." "Of course." She hesitated, just for a second. I know what you did on the Draxon file. I know what you tried to stop. Just for what it's worth." There it was, a flicker of truth behind the corporate choreography. "Appreciate that," I said. Then I handed her my badge, my laptop, and the company phone. That was it. 7 years reduced to a cardboard box and a quiet exit. But what they didn't know, what no one in that building realized, was that they hadn't just fired a man. They'd severed something deeper. See, they thought I was valuable because of what I did. Numbers hit, deals closed, risk assessed. But the real value? It had always been what I protected. And they'd just torn that net away, assuming they'd never need it again. I didn't update LinkedIn. Didn't post some polished "onto new adventures" farewell. Didn't take a sabbatical in Bali or start a podcast about resilience. I went home, unloaded the box, poured myself a drink. Then I sat on the porch with my laptop and started writing. Not a resume, a list. Not of jobs, of people. Because what Kel Morris had never understood, what Elena and her board full of polished teeth had willfully ignored, was that my job was never about just pushing contracts. It was about relationships. Trust built one call, 1-2 a.m. escalation, one funeral showing, one kid's soccer game at a time. I opened an old spreadsheet. Not company-owned, just mine. Notes I'd kept on real people, real conversations, who had twin daughters, who'd quietly fought cancer, who'd called me first when they thought their supplier was cooking numbers. There were 87 names on that list. I didn't reach out. I didn't have to. That wasn't how this worked. Instead, I waited. Because when you build real trust, you don't chase the phone. It rings. It took 3 days. First was a text from Jeff Sullivan, VP of Ops at Lantec Industries. I'd helped him negotiate clean water compliance in 2020, pro bono. He hadn't forgotten. Heard what happened. Total garbage. If you're taking calls, I've got something. Then Angela Becker, who used to run logistics at our Nashville contract. Then Vikram from DC, who once told me I was the first vendor who actually listened. The messages didn't stop. They weren't job offers, not yet. They were temperature checks. People quietly asking if I was still in the game, still willing to fight the kind of fight they knew I fought. Then, on a rainy Thursday morning, I got the message that changed everything. Subject, coffee. From Lena Choi, COO at Raventon Group. We'd met once, at a regional compliance summit in DC 2 years back. I'd been on a panel about ethics in government partnerships. She'd asked a sharp question about vendor accountability and stuck around afterward to challenge my answer. I remembered her immediately. Smart, unshaken, no interest in pleasantries. Her email was 4 lines. "Heard you're not with Kel Morris anymore. We respect why. We've got something brewing that needs that kind of clarity. Coffee this week?" Discreet, obviously. I stared at it for a minute, then typed back. Named the time. We met at a quiet place across the river. Nothing corporate, just a bookstore cafe with good espresso and no press. Lena was already seated, no laptop, no assistant. Just a plain leather notebook and the same laser focus I remembered. She got to the point. We're bidding on a federal infrastructure oversight contract. High stakes, long tail, 280 million projected over 5 years. I leaned back, eyebrows raised. That's real money. It is. And it's also why I need someone who won't bend when the pressure comes. Someone who's already shown they'll walk away from the wrong kind of money. She paused. We're not interested in slick. We're interested in clean. I didn't respond right away. Just let the silence stretch. Then I asked, who else is bidding? She didn't flinch. Kelmaris. I exhaled slowly. Not surprised, just interested. They need this, I said. They were shifting budget into federal positioning even before I left. She nodded. We know. They're in deep already, but they have exposure, blind spots. We think you know where. I looked at her. This wasn't about revenge. This was precision and respect. And she wasn't offering me a job. She was offering me a weapon, not to destroy anyone, but to build better. I leaned forward. Let's talk terms. By the end of that coffee meeting, I wasn't just considering Lena's offer. I was already mapping the battlefield in my head. Kelmaris didn't know it yet, but they were walking into a knife fight dressed for a ribbon-cutting ceremony. And I wasn't swinging wild. I was going to cut once and cut deep. Let's be clear. Raventon Group wasn't flashy. No Manhattan office tower. No 5-star retreats in Napa. But they were efficient, profitable, and, more importantly, clean. Their name didn't set off alarms in Washington. They didn't operate in the gray. And they were hungry. They gave me full scope authority over proposal strategy and the title to match. Director of Strategic Compliance and Partnerships. The message was clear. Build it your way. Just win. So I started where Kelmaris never had the patience to look. The people. I traveled. Quietly. Sat with county infrastructure directors who hadn't seen a federal rep in 2 years. Took notes in community centers with leaky ceilings and old HVAC units humming in the background. I asked about what wasn't working, not in the policy, but in the rollout. I didn't sell them anything. I just listened. Meanwhile, Kelmaris went big. They threw money at polished decks, staged glossy accessibility videos with drone shots of bridges and school buses, flew in lobbyists to work the agency staffers. Same playbook I'd once helped them write. But what they couldn't copy, what they didn't know how to fake, was trust. At Raventon, I built a ground game. A real-time needs mapping system for underserved rural zones. A phased vendor selection plan that included minority-owned contractors without burying them in bureaucracy. A post-award transparency model that let municipalities track usage line by line. I wasn't just building a proposal. I was building credibility, brick by brick. And here's the thing. I knew Kelmaris' structure. I'd helped design their internal bidding process, including the blind spots. I knew they'd inflate projected compliance savings to hit procurement benchmarks. I knew they'd bundle advisory services into subcontractor fees to mask cost over ages. I knew their so-called audit readiness plan was just a recycled deck from 2019. So I laced our proposal with counters. Point by point, subtle, undeniable, impossible to ignore. And when it came time to submit, I made sure ours was 22% leaner on paper and 10 times more defensible under scrutiny. Lena reviewed it line by line, said just 5 words. It's a surgical hit. Perfect. I nodded once. Now we wait. But there was one more move I hadn't told her about yet. See, in federal bids, it's not just about numbers. It's about confidence, that if things go sideways, the prime can manage the fallout. So when the agency scheduled finalist interviews, I made a call to an old contact in procurement, someone I'd once stayed on the phone with at 1 a.m. during a hurricane because their vendor's logistics center had flooded. We'd never talked since. I didn't ask for favors, just said, if your team's reviewing Draxon-related proposals, double-check Kelmaris' disclosures. That Cyprus route they buried might still be open. I didn't even have to say the rest, just left it there. 3 days later, Raventon's legal liaison forwarded a redacted memo. Subject, conflict of interest flag, finalist #3, further documentation requested. Finalist #3 was Kel Maris, and I hadn't lifted a finger. The interview phase came next, and this was where everything could tip. I walked into the room dressed the same way I always had. Simple navy suit, no pretense, no theatrics, just facts. 2 agency officials, 1 ethics officer, 1 outside compliance observer. I recognized Ty Mallon immediately, Kelmaris's senior director of partnerships. He was one of the quiet ones, had never liked me, never liked the way I built influence through consistency instead of performance theater. He gave me a smile that was half amusement, half warning. I returned it with nothing. The panel started. They asked about rollout plans, budget guardrails, staff scalability. Then came the real question, the one I knew was coming. What's your approach to cross-border subcontracting and offshore compliance assurance? I didn't flinch. Transparency is easy to promise. It's hard to structure, so we don't promise it. We build it, in writing, into the contract. We don't rely on post-award goodwill. We make sure compliance is measurable, enforceable, and above all, auditable. Because when you wait for an audit to fix something, it's already too late. The ethics officer looked up, met my eyes, then underlined something in her notes. I knew that look. We were in. The room was silent when I finished. You learn to read silence when you've been in this game long enough. There's the polite silence, the kind people give when they're waiting to move on. Then there's the quiet that comes after clarity. This was that second kind. I let the moment breathe. No need to fill the air. The agency ethics officer glanced at the contracting lead. A shared nod, subtle but real. I'd said what they needed to hear, not because I was clever, but because I was the only person in the room who understood the stakes, not just in legal terms, in human terms. When you've seen what happens when contracts go wrong, roads left half-finished, vendors ghosting towns mid-project, budgets drained while bridges rot, you stop caring about the show. You start caring about impact. They wrapped up the interview 10 minutes early, thanked me for my time, asked if I had any questions. Just one, I said, standing calmly. How many applicants address data portability and interagency accountability reporting in their implementation phase? They looked surprised. One of them smiled faintly. None that I recall, the lead said. I nodded once. Good to know. Then I left. No handshake theatrics, no fake charm, just clarity in my step. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was anxious, because my mind wouldn't stop running scenarios. I'd been here before. Not in this exact chair, not with these exact stakes, but in this same zone of tension, the in-between moment when you've done everything right and now must wait while others catch up. I didn't pace. I didn't call Lena. I didn't check my inbox every 5 minutes. I sat on my porch just like I had the night I was fired. This time, no bourbon, just coffee and a clean conscience. And then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Washington area code, I answered. This is Daniel Marks. Mr. Marks, this is Valerie Chen from the Office of Federal Infrastructure Oversight. We've completed the evaluation process for Contract Initiative 94A. You're receiving this call because Raventon Group has been selected as the prime awardee. I said nothing for a moment. Then, understood. Thank you for the call. She paused. Also, the panel wanted to pass along that your interview was described as illuminating. I smiled. That's kind of them. She continued. Next steps will be formalized in writing, but we've also had a request from project leadership that you serve as point of contact and strategic lead for compliance coordination. There it was. Not just a win, trust. Not just the contract, the responsibility. I accept, I said. I called Lena next. She picked up halfway through the first ring. You got it, I said. There was a second of silence on her end, not because she didn't believe it, but because she needed a second to feel it. Then, holy shit. Full award, I said. All 4 zones. We're the lead contractor. I've been named strategic compliance lead. She stopped, laughed breathlessly. Okay, all right. I'm breathing, that's huge. They marked Kel Maris down for ethics exposure, I added. Looks like someone flagged their Cyprus structuring. Her voice dropped, amused. How subtle of you. I said nothing, I said, grinning. People remember what matters. Then I heard her open a drawer, papers rustling. We've got 3 weeks to prep initial rollout. I'll get the implementation leads on a call in the morning. And Daniel? Yeah? I want you to run this your way. No flash, no theater, just results. You'll get them, I said. And I meant it, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't doing this to prove anything. I was doing it right, with the people who valued the work, not the noise around it. But Kelmaris, they didn't take the loss quietly. Not even close. It started small, a LinkedIn post from their PR director, thinly veiled shade about aggressive low ballers and unproven firms winning contracts they can't deliver on. Then came the emails. A few mutual contacts forwarding me messages they'd received from Kelmaris's BD team, the usual spin. The contract will collapse under poor management. Raventon doesn't have the scale. They'll be coming to us to bail them out within a year. I didn't respond, didn't comment, didn't correct. I didn't have to. Because what they hadn't realized yet was that their problem wasn't me winning. It was that I was now holding the map, and they had to walk through territory I controlled. They just didn't know how far I was willing to go yet, but they'd find out soon. By the time the contract was publicly announced, the press had already shaped the narrative. Underdog Consultancy wins $280 million federal compliance contract over industry giant. Raventon Group edges out Kelmaris in surprise infrastructure deal. Agency prioritized ethics, community ties, and final award. I didn't ask for the headlines, but I wasn't about to apologize for them either. Kelmaris had played the same loud game for years. Overpromise, underdeliver, dominate through volume. They'd learned how to win attention. But attention doesn't close contracts that last. Trust does. Still, the real shift came 2 weeks after the award. That's when I got the first report across my desk. Subcontractor request. Kelmaris Strategic Technologies Division, requesting onboarding access as a Tier 3 systems integration vendor on Phase 2 of the rollout. I stared at the name for a full minute. Thought maybe it was a joke, but it wasn't. See, what Kelmaris hadn't known when they filed their aggressive slate of infrastructure-aligned subsidiaries last year was that one of them had been pre-approved under a secondary systems bid. A narrow slice of the overall work, buried in a line item. At the time, no one expected them to win that, or to ever report to me.
But now?
Now they couldn't touch that work without coming through my office, my timelines, my ethics review. It wasn't irony, it was structure. And structure is far more brutal than revenge. The first status report from them was late. The second one was bloated with fluff and padded projections. The third had inconsistent numbers that didn't align with field reporting. I sent it back, annotated. Line 6, projection exceeds pre-approved variance. Line 14, language contradicts federal audit guidelines. Line 19, strike, unverifiable. Reply, please correct and resubmit by Friday 4 p.m. No commentary, no history, just process. They had no idea how to handle that. Because Kelmaris was used to personalities, leverage, back-channel pressure, not procedural consequences. By the third month, I started seeing the cracks. Whispers from shared vendors. CFOs from small municipalities asking why one subcontractor was so difficult to pin down. Private messages from internal employees, quietly checking if there might be other opportunities at Raventon. Then came the news I'd been waiting for. Internal restructuring at Kelmaris. Quiet layoffs. Leadership rotations. One executive resignation. I read the press release like a novelist rereading the final page of a book they never meant to finish. And that's when I got the call. Unknown number. Private line. I answered anyway. Daniel, it's Jennifer Royce. I sat up a little straighter. CEO of Kelmaris. Her voice was brittle. Smooth in that way, executives learn to fake under pressure, like the surface of glass that's already cracked on the underside. Thank you for taking the call. Of course, I said. I assume you've seen the recent changes, she added too quickly. I have, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I read the public release. Sounds like big moves. Pause. We're experiencing some operational friction, yes, but we're adapting. Glad to hear it. Another pause, this one longer. We'd like to request a meeting regarding the compliance integration process. There have been some concerns about the intensity of your review cadence. Translation: You're applying more scrutiny than they can absorb. I'm simply enforcing the terms of the contract, I said calmly. Same standards apply to every subcontractor. You signed the agreement. We'd like to discuss potential amendments to streamline communications. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. I'm open to a meeting, I replied. Send over the agenda. But understand, the structure we've built is designed to last 10 years. I'm not revising it just because it's inconvenient. Another silence. Then, understood. Before she hung up, she added, We didn't expect you'd be the one sitting at the table when we came around. I know, I said. And I meant it. Because people like Jennifer, like Elena, like Ty, they never expect the man who walked out quietly to be the one holding the gate when they come crawling back. They assume silence is surrender. But silence can also be design, patience, discipline, and eventually, power. Friday, 3:58 p.m., 2 minutes before the compliance deadline. My inbox chimed. New email. Subject: Revised Report Strategic Tech Division, Phase 2. From Aaron Caldwell. Title: VP, Kelmaris Strategic Technologies. Former title: Director of Compliance, and one of the 5 people who sat silently around the table the day I was fired. I opened the report. This time it was cleaner. The metrics aligned. Language was tight. No wild cost drifts. No buried fluff. Almost respectful. I scrolled to the bottom and found something new. We appreciate your detailed notes in last week's review. Adjustments have been implemented per your recommendations. No apology. No smiley face. Just the sound of a fortress realizing who holds the key to the back gate. I replied. Received, confirmed, noted for Q3 evaluation. No warmth, no hostility, just cold professional finality. This wasn't about revenge. This was governance. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was upholding a structure they once believed themselves too powerful to obey. Now they sent reports to me, and I reviewed them like any other subcontractor. Fairly, precisely, without favor. That, perhaps, was the cruelest truth of all, but the cracks were deepening. Jason, an engineer I once mentored at Kelmaris, called me late one night. You didn't hear it from me, he said. But there's panic in ops. They're down 3 leads. New hires are walking after 2 weeks. Rumor is the board wants to divest the Strategic Tech Division entirely. I listened without interruption. They're blaming the contract, he added, saying the federal oversight process is overly aggressive. I laughed once, quietly. It's not aggressive, it's just working. Exactly, and they can't function inside it. He hesitated. If anything opens up at Raventon, I cut him off gently. Send me your resume, I'll take care of it. And I meant that too, because even in a battlefield, not everyone's the enemy. Some are just survivors of bad leadership, looking for a way out. Meanwhile, at Raventon, we were building something better. Not louder, not flashier, but stronger. We didn't poach, we didn't gloat, we just hired well. By the end of month 4, 5 former Kelmaris employees had quietly joined our compliance ops team. 2 more had accepted offers. None of them made public statements. No one leaked anything. They came for the culture. They stayed for the clarity. Lena stopped by my office one afternoon with a report in hand. They're bleeding accounts, she said, dropping a file on my desk. Government? Private. 3 logistics clients and a utilities firm. All firms where you were the original strategist. I didn't look surprised. They never replaced the relationship, just the title. She nodded. You think they'll survive? Technically, sure, I said. But functionally, they've already surrendered the one thing they can't rebuild. She leaned against the doorframe, watching me. What's that? Credibility. That night, I sat at home with a glass of water and reread the very first compliance memo I'd written at Raventon. It wasn't fancy, just a simple mission statement for the division. Integrity isn't a trait, it's a system, a habit, a structure people trust not because they're told to, but because it works, even when no one's watching. I remembered writing that, At midnight, in a folding chair, no salary yet, no title, just a promise. Now, that sentence had become policy. And somewhere across the city, in a sleek office that once felt invincible, someone was probably rewriting a contract clause they never expected would be enforced. Because the man they'd called too rigid had built a system where every clause mattered, and they had to live inside it now. Every week, every form, every oversight cycle, they had created the structure. I had become its spine,